Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking with someone that I met online in a group called Lunch Club. You might want to check it out. It's kind of a fun type of online networking thing. And if you want more information, just let us know. But it's one of those things that we're doing more now because of COVID, because of all sorts of things. We are just truly expanding our online networking, and you get to meet some really cool people. And the funny thing is, this person is actually not too far from me. So maybe we'll meet in real life. So please join me in welcoming Jean Moorhead to our program today. Welcome, Jean.
Deb, so good to be with you and looking forward to this.
Great. On this Valentine's Day, it's always so much fun to have a program on a holiday, and so we're just going to share the love with a lot of great information we've got today. So let me tell people about you, and then we will dive into this. So Jean Moorhead has owned and managed 7 businesses throughout his career, 6 of which have been successful. He primarily focuses on helping independent businesses grow. A majority of his work experience originated from his time spent at a family business, buying losing radio stations and subsequently turning them into profitable businesses. Each new acquisition meant a new market with all the challenges of a new business. Jean and his colleagues hired, trained, fired, begged, and borrowed ideas to help the stations prosper. Simultaneously, Jean spent time developing advertising for his client companies. After he sold his last 2 radio stations, he ventured out and started an advertising agency of his own. He successfully created a one-store marketing test into a national franchise with 105 stores, which was eventually sold to a public corporation for a profit. Jean's agency functioned as an outsourced marketing department for the majority of his clients. While working for different leadership teams, Jean learned firsthand how different companies confront and struggle with all the components of business growth. This interest resulted in Jean reading Gino Wickman's book, Traction. Within a chapter, he was hooked and instinctively knew that he would be able to help businesses grow more effectively and profitably through what Gino calls EOS. Jean Moorhead is now one of over 197 extensively and continually trained implementers worldwide. Holy schmoly. So again, Jean, welcome.
Well, thank you, Deb. And thank you for reading that just like I wrote it.
I know. And we always sound so impressive, right? But, it is impressive, the career that you have had. But I always like knowing, and we learned a bit about your career in that bio, but tell us how you really did discover that what you're doing now is truly your passion in life.
Okay. Thank you. That's a really good question because it's the denouement. So through all my advertising years in both in radio and then moving in the agency and working with my own companies, I got to see how owners, leadership teams really struggle with business growth, just like we did with our companies. Mm-hmm. And it was by accident in April of 2013. I was actually on a webinar from HubSpot about inbound marketing. Mm. And the moderator puts up on the screen, she says, "Hey, we found this neat new document that we like it so much we use it now with all our clients. It's called a Vision Traction Organizer." Mm-hmm. And I looked at this thing and I went, wow, this is a 2-page business plan. Mm-hmm. Isn't this cool?
Right.
And she said, yeah, this guy, Gino Wickman, wrote this book called Traction, and it's really pretty neat. It's designed for small, mid-sized companies. So, well, I've ordered the book before the show's over. Mm-hmm. and not a word of a lie, the book comes in. I'm not halfway through chapter 1, Deb, and I looked up out loud and said, where in the heck was this guy when I needed him 20 years ago?
I know. Mm-hmm.
And Deb, to be honest, that's the G-rated version of what I actually said. But I just knew all of the issues that everybody struggles with. Because I had read all of the books, Gerber, all the Emleth's books, Lencioni's books, certainly Collins, great, and ask us what were we able to put to use, and the answer was nothing.
Right. And, they're good books, and you think,
yeah, and we actually had a meeting one day at the agency, and I remember sitting down. There was 5 of us at the conference table. We're getting ready to discuss how we're going to do this, and we started the meeting, and we were looking at each other, not too sure who was going to say what we're going to do, and then knock comes into the door. It's when the administrative assistant says, "Oh, we have a problem."
Uh-oh.
She announced the problem, and you have never seen 5 people leave a room go, "Oh yeah, we got to get on this," because we realized we were going nowhere. So this is what this is. Gino's brilliance was that he took all of this great work and put it into a how-to manual for small to mid-sized companies. So I got it, and then that was April of 2013, and August I got trained by Gino, and I've been doing this ever since. It's very rewarding work.
I love it.
Yeah.
And it really is one of those simple, basic concepts that we have spent our entire careers making extremely complicated. And I think that's the thing is, like you mentioned, a 2-page business plan. How many times, and I'm a marketing person, so we have marketing plans and all these, and we put together these documents and we research. We might hire someone to do them for us. All of these things. They're bound, they're put in a 3-ring binder, and then they're on a bookshelf somewhere behind us.
Absolutely. They're on the credenza.
Right. And somebody says, well, what does our marketing plan say? And you look around and you go, well, let's see, it's here next to the business plan. And so we put all of that thought into it, and then we never look at it again. Absolutely. And it's because we overcomplicated everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So the EOS is Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's actually made up of 6 parts. So let's kind of walk through those and tell us what all what it is, and because it like I said, it boils down to pretty simple, but we do have to spend some time thinking about it. So what are the 6 principles?
Yeah. So let me lead with something right before that. And the question is, what is it that we do? And so we help business owners and their leadership teams to get what they want from their business. And we do that by implementing this very simple business operating system with basic tools that help them do 3 things, Deb: vision, traction, and healthy. Vision being getting that owner and that leadership team all 100% on the same page, understanding where they're going, how they're going to get there. Traction from the standpoint of getting that team more accountable and disciplined, executing on that. And lastly, healthy being getting that team to, in fact, function like a healthy team. Because as we all know, sometimes leaders don't play well together. Especially the strong ones. So from there, as the leadership team goes, we eventually get to the point where the entire organization is all on the same page in doing that. And the key component is that drives this is to be able to learn and then strengthen 6 key components of the business. And so I'll do a quick highlight on that. And
see, they're looking for you already.
So the first one is the vision component. And as I said, it's getting everybody all 100% on the same page, understanding where they're going, how they're going to get there. The next one is the people component. People meaning, how do you define what great people look like for your organization? And we have a system to help them to be able to define and work through that. I'll come back to that a little later. Next one is the data component. The data component is where we get this business functioning on some simple numbers, to be able to predict where they're going. One of the things about numbers is that numbers don't lie.
Right.
And you avoid all of the egos, the personalities, the opinions on things, and you just run the business on some simple, hard numbers. So that's the third component. From there, we go to the issues component. The issues component is very simply, all companies have issues. Good companies are very good at solving those issues. And we have an issue solving track that's designed to help you not just solve the issue, but to solve it permanently. From there, we have the process issue. And, Deb, there's a reason why people pay $2 million to go to Hamburger University and before they buy a McDonald's franchise, because they have processes for everything. You know how to run a car through the driveway in 60 seconds, how to have a 55-year-old working side by side with a 15-year-old, and what temperature they got to keep the French fries at. They got processes for everything. So process is really about getting what is the most important stuff in your business done the right way, the same way every time. Makes it easier for you to scale the business. It certainly makes it easier to manage the business, makes it more profitable, and actually becomes more fun to run the business. And the last key component is the traction component. This is where the rubber hits the road. So, as we like to say, vision without traction is hallucination.
Right.
Where we bring the accountability and discipline in the organization. So on a high note, that's what those 6 key components are, and how we go about driving that process is something else we can talk about if you like.
Right. And one of the things that struck me both as we were chatting about this, and then I did glance through Gino's book, is this is not just for companies that have 10,000 employees. It can even work for the one person business. How many times does that one person business not know what their vision is? And a one person business still works with other people. Usually, they have a team of consultants, of, business partners, things like that. I mean, all these things still are very relevant no matter what size your business is.
Yeah, Debbie, we can work actually with small companies like that and with very large companies. We do have it. Our sweet spot typically are companies that have 10 to 250 employees. But
the smaller guys are going to be more of a do-it-yourself type of thing.
I do have a client that is one person, started the business, but he clearly knew what he was doing and what he was going to do. So I said, okay, let's go do this.
Right. And they can easily, for that size of organization, they can do this on their own. And so, and a big part of that is some of these really are, components that you do need to have a little bit more size in order to really do. But I think it's I was also thinking as I was going through this, I haven't always worked for myself. I've worked for, at one point I worked for the 7th largest corporation in the world. And I worked for one of the largest nonprofits. I mean, all sorts of things. And I was looking through this thinking, okay, sometimes we had the vision and then it fell apart. And like one of I worked for the American Cancer Society. They are, then and now pretty clear on what their vision is. And many nonprofits are. I think that's probably one of the places where the vision truly is known. But then everything else just kind of fell apart. And I think part of that was with those companies, they were so big that it was hard for them to do any of this. It was just, you had companies in various countries, states, wherever, and pulling that all together was just very difficult. So I can see why, having, a company that's in one place with 10 to, a couple hundred folks really is very optimal for this type of process.
Yeah. We need that entrepreneurial thinking. That has typically people we work with are entrepreneurial companies, and they usually have some sort of frustration it's in their mind. As I said, they're in this space of 10 to 250 employees, but they're growth minded, and there's usually some things that are getting in the way here. In other words, he's been around and it's successful, but it could be a control issue, is where the owner feels like the business is running him rather than or her, and then the other way around. It's their time is just like, I'm tired of the 70-hour work weeks. Certainly, as profit is an issue, like there's just not enough of the profit that they think they should be. Another issue is the people component. People meaning customers, people meaning staff, people meaning vendors, people meaning partners. It seems like nobody's listening. And the other one typically is that what they feel like they're hitting the ceiling. Is that they take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and then it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. They just can't seem to break through the ceiling. And the last one is that they're trying things, but nothing's working. They read books, they go to seminars, go to webinars, and they try something.
Like we were saying, they read the book and they go, oh.
And the bad news about that is that when we find we have owners doing that, is the staff catches on. And and you get the undertone of, don't worry, this too shall pass. Whatever the new idea of the month. So that's typically what's going on. There's some sort of a frustration that's triggering us, and that's what motivates somebody to say, is this right for us?
Right. Yeah. I've actually been staff thinking, oh God, they got a new book. And usually something good does come of it, but more often than not, it doesn't last.
It doesn't stick.
Correct. Yeah, and so whatever it is, it's great. It works really well until squirrel, and they go on to the next thing, or we slide back into what we were doing before.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Welcome to the world.
Right. Yeah.
I resemble that on every remark that before we go out.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just, it's human nature for people to stick with what they've done in the past. How many times do we talk with people and they say, well, why do you do whatever this way? And the response is, well, that's the way we've always done it. And it's, and we're not saying that's wrong. We're not saying it's right, but things have changed. And we'll talk about COVID in a second. But things just changed all the way around. People, technology changed, maybe is one of the biggest drivers of why things change.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that the philosophy of, but this is the way we've always done it, more than likely is not going to continue to make you successful. They all change. I mean, look at, let's talk about, say, fast food as an example. And this does pertain to COVID. When people could no longer go into their restaurants, they had to change very quickly. And I think, we're both here in Atlanta. Chick-fil-A led the pack with this. They figured out really, really, really fast how to truly optimize their drive-through. I went through a drive-through in a Chick-fil-A in Missouri, of all places, that had 4 lines. And we drove up and we thought, we're here forever.
Yeah.
It was one of the shortest things. I mean, you talk about running quickly and efficiently, and so, but part of that was because, whether they have actually, participated in your program or not, they had all of those pieces in place. So they knew, okay, obviously they knew what their vision was. Who are our people? Their data was, how many could they get through? I mean, all of these various things. Obviously, they knew what the issues were. And so they were able to switch their process very quickly so that then they got traction with it.
Yeah, certainly. They are certainly one of the great companies of America.
Right.
For everything they do.
Right. And it does, it transitions to other things. Now, see, my phone's ringing. It was one of those where, I remember I'm from Colorado. And so I still, watch a lot of the news and things back there. And one of the things that I remember was, at some point during COVID, they were doing a shot thing. And they were doing it at the football stadium, and so you got in line in your car, and of course they had them here at the Benz and all these places. But the one in Colorado, people were in line for hours and hours and hours. And I remember they said that a Chick-fil-A manager got out of his car, walked to the front of the line and said, "You need to do this, 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 and this." And whoever was in charge paid attention to him. And cars started just, going right through. And it was, and part of that, well, yeah, they knew all of that. I mean, they knew their people, their data, all of those things, even though this was something that just kind of popped up. But it shows that this system transfers fairly easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does.
Well, let's kind of go through each of these because they're very interesting. Okay. And we mentioned at the top, vision is obviously the hardest thing. And so many people start a business they all start it for a variety of reasons. But it was their vision. Hey, we just needed to make money. We got fired. We needed to make money. Or I have this goal. Now, okay, money has to be part of this. They have to make money or they don't go forward. But, so I think that really is the thing. Many people don't even know what their vision is. So how do you work with folks to determine exactly what that vision is and then get everybody else to believe it too?
Sure. Thank you. So that vision traction organizer that I talked about at the beginning is the key.
Right.
So how we get everybody all on the same page is by asking 8 questions.
Okay.
The 8 questions are: what are your core values? What is your core focus? What is your core target? What is your long-term target? What is your marketing plan? What is your 3-year picture? Your 1-year plan? What are your 90-day rocks? And what is your issues list? So we have a system, a process about how we go about actually answering all those questions. So we sit down with a leadership team, and each one becomes its own discussion session where we will discuss, debate, and decide what the answers are for that particular company. And so we just start with the core values. Core values are hugely important today, Deb. It's because it's how you're going to be hiring, firing, training, remunerating, reviewing people. There really are, and we have a whole system that comes in behind that. But so the first thing is getting those core values, and it's important for people to understand this is not a marketing term. This is really typically it's the business owner's belief, but of the business world, and if he or she sold that company and had a non-compete clause, had to go in another industry, and they opened up a new business the next week, those same core values would likely transfer with them. So this is not a marketing gimmick. These are your what's really important to you as the owner of the business about how the business world works. So that's the first one. And it's not so much what the answers are to these 8 questions. What's really important is that this leadership team agrees and can easily communicate them, because there's a process coming behind that as well. Because as you talked about, it's not something we just put back, okay, we got them, let's put it on the bookshelf and we're good. No.
Or on the wall, right? We've all seen the things that are on the wall, the mission statement.
Yes. So we actually use all of these tools on a weekly basis. So we go through the core values. We do the same thing, core focus, which is a mission statement, if you will. There's 2 components to that. It's what is your purpose, cause, or passion, as you just said. Besides the money, why are you in this business? Why did you decide to be in this business and not something else? What's driving all of that? And then what is it that you're absolutely the best in your area in? What is your core? What is your niche? What is it that you do best? From there, we set again. We discuss, debate, decide what those answers are for that company. We then determine what that long-term target is. What does that owner want to do? Does he want to sell a company? Does he got family members coming into it? Does he want his employees to take over the business, or do they just have some 10-year goals? But they set the term of 20 years, 10 years, 5, whatever it is, they set the term on that. But again, we discuss, debate, and decide what those answers are. From there, we build a marketing strategy. It's the same thing. We clearly determine what is the target market in terms of where are their customers, their best customers coming from geographically, demographically, and psychographically. And yes, somebody can have more than one target market. That's okay.
Right.
They're all separate. Yeah. And then we have what we call the 3 uniques. In other words, we now define who we need to go after to get new customers. Well, what do we need to say to them when we get them? And it's what we call 3 uniques, which is a process to be able to deliver something that is uniquely yours. And from there, we move on into defining the 3-year picture. In other words, we have a long-term goal, 5, 10 years out. So what's it going to look like in 3 years for us to be on target for that long-term goal? In 3 years, what does it look like? What's the revenue goal? What's the profit goal? What are the key measurables that everybody needs to get on the same page? It's really important for this leadership team to all see the same thing and want the same thing. And the old thing, if you can see it and you can believe it, you can achieve it. So we again have that exercise where they define, well, okay, we're growing this way, we're growing vertically, we're growing horizontally, it's whatever it is that they want to do, and how many employees will they have, and just get a picture of that. So that's the vision side. There's 5 questions that make up the vision side. The next 3 questions deal with the traction. In other words, how are we going to be accountable for making this happen? So first one on that is, well, what's our 1-year plan? In other words, we have a 3-year picture. So what do we got to get done in the next 12 months to be on target for that 3-year picture? So what's that revenue goal? What is the profit goal? What are the 3 to 7 most important things? Not 27. Everything at EOS is less is more. If everything's important, nothing's important. So we just concentrate on getting what are the 3 to 7 most important things this team's got to get done in the next 12 months. From there, we take it, drill down even further, and this is where traction really starts to come into play. We have 90-day rocks. The term rocks made popular by Stephen Covey, and they're 90-day goals. And it's just breaking apart, okay, if we have a 1-year plan at the end of first quarter, where do we need to be on target for a 12-month plan? So what's that revenue goal? What are those profit goals? What are the 3 to 7 most important things that have to be done in that quarter, both as a company and individually for each of the leadership team members? So, and that repeats itself. In other words, we do this every quarter. The other component is the issues component, and that's just getting everything out of your head and onto paper. What's ticking you off and who's ticking you off? And this is where being open and honest, we get to this particular point where people can feel comfortable to say, okay, I'm uncomfortable with this process, knowing that my teammates were all functioning on what's the best interest of the company and not individually or our departments, and that we can work on solving those issues. So there's a whole process with that. So that's how we get everybody all on the same page. It's answering those 8 key questions. The question is, once we get the leadership team, we have a system for getting them into the entire company. We have what's called the company state of the company meeting that's done quarterly, where they review all of this. You know, as you said earlier, Deb, where people, we've got this plan, we put it on the book, and we never deal with it. Well, we deal with all this stuff every quarter, so everybody gets to see it. And the beauty of this is, if you told me one time about, here's our goals, I'll go, Deb,
I know,
you're doing great,
And I've got work to do, so I'm going to go back to do it.
And then you tell me second time, oh yeah, Deb, we got it. The 4th or 5th time you've told me this, I'm starting to go, I think they're pretty serious about this stuff. And about that time, you start finding your staff members start coming back to you and saying, our core value is this, and somebody was doing this, and it's really very rewarding, but it takes time.
Right.
To
Oh,
get
yeah.
it done. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. So that's eventually, and there's other components to it, but that's how we get everybody on the same page, understanding where they're going and how they're going to get there.
Right. And you mentioned that, clearly a company that's functioning well is not going to call you in. It's a company that is struggling, for whatever reason. So, I would imagine when you start the process and you start through those questions. So, say you've got 5 people on the leadership team. I'm guessing frequently you get 5 different answers for many of those questions. How do you work? And it, it obviously can't be, well, the CEO believes X, therefore everybody else have to believe it. How do you work through this process of getting everybody on the same page, and maybe even telling, person number 4, you might need to look elsewhere?
Well, thank you. You got a lot of things rolled up into one, but we do have these when we start off our process, we have some training sessions to how to use the tools and let them start using the tools. And from there, we have these quarterly sessions. So during the training session, that leadership team, when we set core values, everybody has an opinion on core values. Right. Everybody's running that. It's just not the owner. Everybody has an opinion on their core values, and they are going to discuss and debate and decide what their core values are. Now, do we get that all done in the first session? Well, most of the time we get pretty close to it, but we go back and revisit every 90 days. Are these still our core values? Right. Does anybody need to change anything? Does anybody? So it's constantly being looked at and upgraded. But that's how we get it done. Is we discuss, debate, and decide as a leadership team. So all of those 8 questions, they all have an opinion. They all get to vote on it. This is part about getting the team healthy at the same time, and understanding that I disagree, Deb. I don't think that your plan A is where we need to go. I think plan B is better. Let's discuss, debate, and decide. Right.
And you might need to come up with plan C.
Exactly. And but by virtue of the fact that we're all open and discussing it, once the team makes a decision that it is plan C that we're going to go with, everybody's on board with that. It's not, I'm going to harbor ill will because my plan didn't get taken. Okay. Now, so that's the vision and how we get it done. It's consistency. Our process, Deb, is about a 2-year process, taken through it. So working with an implementer, it's typically 10 sessions over 2 years, and how it goes. Some companies go at a faster speed, some go at a slower speed. There's no right or wrong answers to any of that. Because all of the work that's done is for every company puts their stuff into it.
Right. So let's talk pandemic. We're almost to the 2-year mark, where they said, okay, everybody stay home for 2 weeks, and we all went, yeah, right. But even companies that were very healthy, that had, every company struggled to some degree. I don't think there was any company that was business as usual. Obviously some, soared, and unfortunately there were some that failed. You talk about having those 1 year, 3-year goals, things like that. And for pretty much everybody, those changed. So, what happens when you have something catastrophic that happens? I used to be in crisis management. And that was one of the big things that we talked about was, what happens if something catastrophic happens to your business? It doesn't have to be a pandemic. Maybe it's a fire, maybe it's a data breach. How do you deal with all of that?
So thank you. Great question. I'm going to give you some examples, some real life examples. So one of my clients was a multimedia publisher, and one of their big publications was in that space of food entertainment.
Yikes!
They had to shut it down and had to release all of their advertisers. That was a big deal. However, then this is what's fascinating. They were able to pivot, and they had just started working on digital advertising and were just dabbling in it. Well, 2 years later, that business is now 50% of the total company's size. It has just grown through the wall. Yeah. And it's also higher margin profit too. So that's one example. I had some people that really had to, that particular company was very aggressive. When they realized that this was happening, they put salaries at 50% and laid off some staff, kept their benefits for them, but they laid off the staff. And they were really quick on that because they realized this was going to be ugly. That only lasted for about 6 months, and they were able to start bringing people back in, and they got back in again. And now everybody's really healthy over there. But I did have companies that saw some slowdown, some turns. I had some that were totally. I had two government contracting companies. Excuse me, that's not one that was totally unaffected, and one actually did. They had a contract with the Air Force, and they realized the Air Force they had hired the people for the contract, ready to start, and like a week before they start, the Air Force realized that they were going to send everybody home, and this was sort of top secret work, so they could not work from home. They had
the computers. Yeah, there's. I used to be in that world too, so I understand that.
You know better. Yeah. So that's that. So pivoting, shifting. Yes, I had a lot of my clients said, thank God we're on EOS. That it made it easier to be able to make those decisions of what you had to do, because some of them were difficult. Right. But everybody's come through.
Well, and, when they have all of this in mind, all of the various parts. So, process, I think that's probably one of the complicated ones. I think many companies didn't actually realize how things got done. It was maybe the easiest way to put it. Yeah. And, and they obviously had to change when you no longer had people in an office. Clearly there are times where you have to be in an office, or in manufacturing would obviously be. But they truly had to figure out what is our processes, and can they be done remotely? Can they be done, with all of the guidelines that are taking place? And I think what we saw and are continuing to see is a lot of those processes have obviously been fine-tuned. They got rid of the things that were a waste of time, waste of energy, I think meetings and things like that would be one of the biggest things. People went, we really didn't have to have a staff meeting the first 15 minutes of every day, or whatever. And that is because they fine-tuned, and, fortunately and unfortunately, they figured out the people. We absolutely have to have these people. And unfortunately, these people, weren't needed, or as you said, not needed now, but we'll bring them back later. Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I missed something. I was getting ready to think of it, and it went past me with listening to you talk. Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah. So all getting back to COVID, at all things that you just talked about is the right people, right seats, making those decisions, restructuring, meeting pulse. That is something how we drive accountability. And so we have these quarterly sessions where every quarter we come together for a full day. And the team sets new goals for the next quarter. We review, how did you do on the last quarter? What did we learn? What do we need to change? Stop, start, all that stuff. Inside of those quarterly, the team has what we call a 90-minute meeting every week. And a lot of people are thinking, wait a minute, a 90-minute meeting every week with a leadership team? That's a long time. Yeah, it's going to save you 2 to 3 times that.
Right.
Because we set an agenda. It's the same agenda that runs every week. You're going to meet on the same day, the same time with the leadership team. And there's an agenda where you review all of your rocks. Are we on target with everything? Scorecard, those numbers on the data, were they all on track? We review employee headlines, customer headlines. We spend of a 90-minute, 60 minutes on issues, on tackling what are the most important issues that we need to resolve this week. We have a process for doing all that. But that runs every week, and this is how we really get traction in the business and accountability going. Because if normally as human beings we can procrastinate on an annual goal,
right?
We'll get on that next month, but this system doesn't allow you to do that, because once you're into a 90-day mode, human nature works in the other direction. We know we can't finesse this. Got to take action on it. And inside of that, we have these weekly meetings to make sure that we're on track, so that we're coming in how the basic system operates.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that one of the ways where this has been extremely beneficial is everybody working from home, because everybody feels disconnected. And so when you're putting that structure in, it brings everybody back. It's like, okay, we're all not just in, 50, 100, however many different locations. We are still part of this company, and having that accountability and knowing that everybody else is being accountable too. That was one of the things that I heard a lot of people talk about was, well, we don't know that the other people are getting their job done. And I think what we discovered in a lot of cases was what we thought was, 6 hours really was like a 2-hour project, things like that. But, being able to have that structure, even when you're in, a bunch of different locations, I think that helps the employees to feel like they are part of that process in that company.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you started off talking about how technology is changing everything. And certainly, that's an understatement. But it's normal for most, take COVID out of the picture. It's normal for most small, mid-sized companies to have outsourced people.
Right.
It could be accounting people. They can be marketing people. There's some.
Right. Makes sense because they don't need them full time.
That being said, they still have to be managed. Okay. Somebody on the team has still got to make sure that that outsourced people is doing the accountability work on that. The other thing I will tell you that we learned when we first went to COVID, we started doing our quarterly meetings with Zoom online, and I can tell you that lasted about 2 sessions, and then everybody said we're going back live again. The not being able to see body language makes a difference. I mean, it's okay. We ran through the meetings, went fine. Everybody rated them well, but there was that missing human component. So right now everybody's live, and we're doing them all live, and I don't see that changing anytime soon unless we get another pandemic. But that was an interesting observation. It is just difficult to maintain a long-term relationship. Now, there are a lot of companies that they're permanently are going to do people online, but it's just an issue. It's just a process. Yeah.
Right.
We do get process, and again, we don't put the process book on the shelf. It gets reevaluated. It's part of what we call LMA, leadership management accountability. If you're department head, you're looking at your people and your processes on a regular basis. How are we doing? What can we improve? What needs to improve? How's the handoffs going with the other departments?
Right. And working remotely takes a very different management style. The managers who really like to have the people where they could touch them, that's not going to work, and I think as we go back into things, that's not going to work, because we're going to be doing hybrid. We're going, all sorts of different things. And so the micromanagement, those type of managers, they're going to be gone. But the managers who are having to manage remotely are having to learn how to do it differently, how to say, okay, everybody has to have their camera on. It was funny on the radio this morning, they were talking about remote meetings, and he said, he would turn his camera off. He said, because he thought these meetings were horrible. And he said, and I literally would take a nap. And he said, I woke up one time to them actually speaking to me, and so, and that's tricky because not everybody wants to be on camera for whatever reason, and or has that capability, and so, and then they also have to learn how to read the body language from, 2 inches below your chin up.
Sure.
And and other subtle things. One of the things we've had some folks on in the last couple of years talking about mental health, and the fact that maybe when we started this, you had the employee who was professionally looking, their hair was combed, they had on nice clean clothes, didn't have to be suit and tie, all those various things, and then all of a sudden they're unkempt. Okay, did they just have a wild night, or is there something else going on? And I think that's part of that whole people thing. If you even if you've got that person in person, are you seeing that there's a change in their behavior?
Yeah. So when we talk about these core values things, that we have what's called we teach them the 90-day rule, and that's very simply this: is when we start to see. We have a tool called a people analyzer. It's marvelously simple, and it's how you rate your people on your core values. And it's a very simple system. They get a plus minus, or a minus on each of the core values. They exhibit that core value most of the time. They do. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. And we go through that. So there's no emotion. There's no history to this, and no baggage. You just sit here, and the leadership teams can rate every person. We have what's called a bar, where here's for example, if you had 5 core values, our recommendation, it needs to be 3 pluses and 2 plus minuses. So if they're rating Gene, and Gene shows up with 3 plus minuses, I'm below the bar. We're going to have a discussion with Gene. Now, there's a whole how we do all this. You just don't walk in and fire somebody,
right?
But everybody's briefed on here's how we're working, so that with the system. And if we have a problem, we're going to have a one-on-one, and the strike one is, Gene, you're below the bar. This is what's happening. Let me give you 3 examples of what's not happening that in the past month. You've got to change this.
Right.
And notice I said, you have to change this. I'm not changing it for you. You need to tell me what you're going to do to get this behavior under control. And so a decision is made, employee starts working. And what we find is this: those people that really are not, you're having that discussion, I don't think he's going to make it. Most of those people will come in and self-deselect themselves. They'll say, I don't, you don't have to fire them. They're going to quit on their own. Yeah. And you can't, the ones that you can save, really do get a benefit of understanding, okay, I'm not necessarily all aware I was causing those problems. I'll get it under control.
Right.
So that's part of what we do on keeping the right people in the right seat. So getting back to your unkempt people, if you got a core value that says, no, you need to look professional, you need to be professional, that would be a violation, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny when you mention that some of this actually does need to be written down as part of HR policies and things like that. I remember years ago when I worked for the American Cancer Society, we had a young woman who incredibly attractive. She was the cutest thing in the world. And she was young. She, 22, 23. And she dressed like a 22, 23-year-old, very cute young woman. Well, the older people in the office didn't like that. And, and so somebody went to her and said, your skirts need to be longer, all these various things.
Sure.
And she looked at them, smart young thing that she was, and she said, tell me where that's in the HR handbook. and of course she was right. Yeah. And so, I mean, we're not saying that you need all these rules, but if you want to be able to say you're not meeting this standard, whether it's clothing, whether it's a sales goal, whether it's whatever, then it needs to be written down, because that way it's not arbitrary. and because then of course what happened with the whole skirt thing was everybody got the skirt policy. And it was kind of the Catholic girls' school thing, if you knelt down, did your skirt touch the ground type of thing, which we all just thought was absolutely hilarious. But when you have things written down, back to the business plan, all of those various things, it takes that arbitrariness out of it. And I think that's, it's just like when we're, raising children. If you let them do this one day and you let them do that the next day, they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And employees need that too.
Yeah. Raising a family and running a business are the same.
Right. Yeah. We need guidelines. And we also need to know what happens when we don't follow those guidelines.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things, Gordon Thomas wrote a book on parent effectiveness training years ago. That was pretty much a guide for training kids that bring up children. And what they did was they looked at above average parents and the average parent, and what did they do differently? And they had a couple of things. And one is that they had the average parent, a good parent, had a handful of rules, 3 to 5 rules, not 25.
Right.
They repeated themselves often. And the number that we use is 7 times. As humans, we need to hear things 7 times.
Right. It's that old marketing rule.
Before the first time. So we have fun with that. And somebody said, well, Gene, I've told you that 3 times. And I'll come back.
You're like, now I need 4 more.
Yeah. So we have a lot of fun with that. And being consistent. One of the key things about this is that your people as an owner and as a leadership team member, your people are looking at you 100% of the time. Are you doing what you say you want us to do? Yeah. Right. Being consistent. Yeah. So it's a handful of things. Yeah.
And I think when we see companies, when we get public, stories about things, that's one of the big things is, they talk about consistency and then they do something different. I think one of the things that we see a lot of is, when someone has an extramarital affair or, a DUI or something like that, it's like, but, he runs an organization that says families come first, or whatever. And everybody's human. I mean, but again, it is that consistency that needs to be carried throughout. And, COVID threw that, let's be honest, but your core values were still your core values, whether you were working from home. And I think that's the thing that people need to come back to is if you don't have those, how are you going to go forward? It's kind of like, I tell people you have to have marketing goals. Because if you don't have a goal, how do you know when you made it? If you just kind of keep going merrily along, that may work for a little while, but you have to have those things set out, not in stone, because things do change, but you need to have them set out. And as you said, every employee needs to know them, from the mail room, janitor staff, all the way up, they need to know them.
Yep. Because they're making decisions at a lower level all the time. And you want them to make those decisions rather than come back to you and say, what do I do now, boss? When something they can really handle on their own, if they understand what the big picture is.
Right. I remember, years ago when I worked for ING, the big financial behemoth, one of the favorite things that our CEO would do was, once a month or so, he would go to the mail room. And because he did this regularly, I didn't panic them, but he knew and he trusted that they would tell him what he needed to hear. And I was the head of communications. And so sometimes I would say, well, where did you hear this? And he would say, well, so-and-so in the mailroom. But it was an interesting dynamic because he really did check in with that level. And we're not saying that's a lower level or anything like that, but they knew more about what was going on in the company than virtually anybody. And I was always fascinated by the fact that he knew that was so important.
Yeah. That's a good CEO taking the
Yeah.
time to do that. Yeah.
Yep. And then
Realizing-
we had this really weird thing with co-CEOs, and that didn't work.
No. Yeah. If two people are accountable, nobody's accountable.
Well, and we had this really big thing of, if mom tells us no, then we're going to go to dad. Yeah. Back to the whole raising the family
That's the
thing.
politicking, and we don't allow politicking. And we
Oh, yeah.
ways around that.
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, Gene, this has been fascinating. And we only have about 5 minutes left. So tell people how they find you and connect with you, and then exactly how you can go in and help them.
So thank you for that. So again, it's we work with these small, mid-sized companies, 10 to 215 people, and you're in growth mode, and you're willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable. Vulnerable being willing to admit that you don't have all the answers, willing to be open-minded, and if just functioning on those things, willing to be open-minded, and wanting to make changes in your business. Take a look at EOS. So so there's a number of ways to do that. There's EOS Worldwide is the website. I have my website, which is www.davmoor.com. You can just look at that. You can see very quickly how we do things and what we do things. And typically what happens is, if you have an interest, typically what is have a short phone call, and where we just sort of discuss, does this seem like it's something you want to do? And our next step really is we have a 90-minute meeting that we would schedule with the owner and the leadership team all together, where I would sit and discuss, give all the EOS background, my background, and show them all the tools we use, all the process we go through, and how that all works. And then it's just a decision. Does this sound like something that would help you get to the next level?
Right. I love it. I love it. And we mentioned the book. So tell us again about the book.
Book is Traction. There's a whole library of books now, but the primary book is Traction, and Gino Wickman, Gino Wickman, Wickman, he's the author. He's quite a guy, one of the most OCD people you've ever met in your life. But I would recommend that book. And if you get the book, if all you do is read the intro in the first chapter, it's 16 pages, you will get a tremendous overview about EOS, and you'll say, oh man, this is something I want to dig into, or not, which is okay.
Right.
But the book is Traction.
I love it. I love it. Well, this really has been a fascinating discussion, and I think it would be great to continue it maybe once things, if they ever settle down, and companies are figuring out what their new normal is. Folks, we ain't going back to January of 2020. Not happening. And so, I'd love to have you on again to discuss how things, it's funny. It's one of those that as things change, they stay the same. I mean, the fundamentals do not change. And so, I think it would be great to have you on again.
Human behavior is human behavior.
Right. I love it. Well, Gene, do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Just don't sweat the small stuff, and most of it's small stuff. And I find worrying about things doesn't help either. And it's just bringing things down to understanding everything that you're dealing with, all your problems are just issues, and there's a way to solve all of your issues. You take them one at a time.
I love it. That's absolutely fabulous. I can't wait to chat again. I'm Deb Creer. I've been talking with Gene. All of a sudden, I had to cough all of a sudden. I've been having a great conversation with Gene Moorhead. Can't wait to do it again. Until next time, everyone have a great day.
Deb, thank you. Look forward to our next time.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.